I had never actually thought of the way he looked at this.
Nor did I.
This was just...
That's gleaned through experience.
We are Compound Everything. We are two self-taught investors who like to talk money, markets, investing, and anything along that genre. And if you can just like and subscribe to our video, that would be really helpful to us. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to glean some wisdom from Charlie Munger.
Yes.
So Warren Buffett said in the 1997 Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, every investor should listen to or watch or read Charlie Munger's speech that he gave to the USC Business School in 1994.
Yes.
So we did that.
Yeah, of course, right away you said, well, if Buffett says every investor should do X, we're going to go.
Then we do X.
Then we do it, yeah.
So the title of the speech is this. It's called a lesson on elementary worldly wisdom as it relates to investment, management, and business.
Right.
And that's the title of the speech. So if you Google that, you will find links to the speech. We couldn't actually find a video of him giving the speech, but you could find a transcript fairly easily. So we found the transcript, so you can either read it, or if you like, you can get your smartphone to read it to you. We've boiled down some of the key lessons that we took away from the speech. And so you may find other ones. If you do, leave them in the comment box. Yeah,
I will confess that it wasn't exactly what I was expecting when Buffett said that every investor should read it.
It was good.
It was very good, but I was expecting more of...
framework?
No, yeah, a framework, yes, a framework for investing.
Yeah.
But rather, it was more so a framework for making decisions in general.
Which is probably
with
actually more useful in a sense.
Yeah, with a lot of business woven throughout it.
Yeah, so what he went through is a bunch of his mental models that he goes through, and then he went off-roading. To other things. That's the way I take it.
Hey, when you're his age and
you could go all off-roading all you want.
You're as successful as he is, you could off-road.
But the point being is he does give some practical tips and whatnot. Yeah. So we took away really 6 points from that speech, and we'll go through those now. He talked about several mental models. And
he started with that. He was kind of doing really well with bullet points on mental models, and then that's when he went off-roading. Well,
he's very keen on that because he says 80 to 90 mental models will get you through about 90% of investing. And he didn't exactly elaborate on exactly what those were. So it's not a cookbook necessarily. I think he wants you to kind of develop that on your own through study of different disciplines and whatnot. And so what did he say? Well, he said one of the first things that an investor needs to know, and it's pretty obvious, is mathematics.
Basic math, though.
Basic mathematics. So arithmetic, but he also said you need to know permutations, probabilities.
Probabilities were huge. He kept going back to probabilities throughout his speech.
And that makes sense. Makes sense because a lot of what investment is probabilities. There's no certainties in investment. I mean, there's no guarantees that Apple will be around next year, even though it's one of the world's largest companies. Good chance, highly likely, but not guaranteed. Probabilities are high, but not guaranteed. Right. So how does that factor into your investment thesis?
Another thing about the math. So mathematics was the first mental model that Munger mentioned in this particular speech. And a couple things that he mentioned just as side notes was he cannot figure out why compounding is not taught in schools. In high schools and middle schools. He doesn't understand why that concept is not taught. And then the other thing that he said is that one thing where the education system really fails is to make math applicable to real life. He said if you can take math and make it applicable to real life, you will change essentially a student's love for math. And so that was just a side note, but
so mathematics key in investing.
Accounting, obviously.
And accounting. And so basic arithmetic, all that stuff. Now, the other thing he had talked about a little bit is an investor should know a little bit about biology. And specifically the area of biology that he mentioned. I mean, if you look at basic biology, it makes some sense. But he was talking specifically about ecosystems. And ecosystems happen...
He said biology at the beginning, and then he got into ecosystems as the speech went on.
And so, as someone who studied biology a fair amount in the past, I thought that was fascinating that he took that kind of turn towards ecosystems. Right. And it makes a lot of sense because what he said is oftentimes in ecosystems, you'll have a small ecosystem and a organism will get very adept at doing something in that ecosystem. And it may be actually a very unfriendly ecosystem, but this organism will survive and actually thrive sometimes in that ecosystem by doing something very specialized. And it's the same in business.
Yeah.
And so one of the examples I believe he gave was that of a magazine. They were in the magazine business there for a while. And so he said that magazines got to be so specialized. He used the example of motocross. And he said that motocross magazines were extremely specialized. And he said that they were kind of a given for these, motocross nuts. They kind of all subscribed to these motocross magazines. And the margins were just massive.
Right. And the reason why ecosystems are so important in business is because of the efficiency that ecosystems bring and the ability to scale.
Right.
That was kind of his point of that mental model, because he's trying to take these mental models and then teach us how to use them when looking at businesses.
Yeah. So the point being is you can get very subspecialized, and sometimes subspecialization in an area can lead to outsized returns for that business.
Right. He used another magazine. Was it Travel?
Travel, yeah.
Yeah, a travel magazine.
He said they got their butts handed to them by another company that went subspecialized.
Right, and it was a certain type of travel. Business travel, I think.
I think it was business travel that they kind of subspecialized in.
Right.
And they beat them out.
And we're kind of seeing that a lot in the way businesses are working now, just the subspecialization. Yes. So advantages to scale were a pretty important part of what Munger spoke about. So he was talking about social proof. He was talking about advertising.
So what's social proof?
Social proof is you kind of take your guide from a friend or someone you know, like, oh, I wasn't thinking of getting an Apple Watch, but then all of a sudden everyone you know has an Apple Watch and they love it.
Yeah.
So you get it, or they all have an Apple Watch and they hate it. So you're like, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to get it. That's social proof.
Yeah.
So
almost like word of mouth.
Word of mouth, right. And then there's distribution, and then there's informational. Okay. So he was just talking about these broad ways of scaling in a company. Right. And he said this advantage of scale leads to a super strong ecosystem. And once you have this super strong ecosystem within the business world, it is hard to take an ecosystem out. Right. But the flip side of that, he was saying, as your business grows and your ecosystem gets stronger and stronger, the disadvantage of that growth is bureaucracy. Right.
And he said, to paraphrase quite closely, he said bureaucracy kills businesses.
Yes.
And so he gave an example actually of Sears Roebuck competing against Walmart. So Walmart, and this is maybe a little bit of a divergence, but Sam Walton, he said, was just fanatical. He was a cloner. He found people he liked.
Yeah, that was interesting to me that he was a cloner, because we've talked about
that being a model.
I didn't know that Walton was a cloner. So that
I didn't know that either.
Okay.
And so apparently Walton was a cloner, and so he just found that people that he liked and business ideas he liked, and he cloned them, and he went and did it even better than the originators.
Right.
And so if you compare him to Sears Roebuck, Sears Roebuck had layers and layers of bureaucracy, being an older business that weighed them down, and he came in and just beat the pants off them.
Yeah, and I think Munger, and that is what he was saying, with that strong ecosystem, as the business grows and becomes really, rooted in the society, the bureaucracy, the monster of bureaucracy grows with it. And Sears couldn't pivot fast enough, because as we all know with bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of different levels that you got to get up through management, and they just could not pivot and compete with Walmart. And Walmart was nimble and quick because they didn't have that. So he did mention that, bureaucracy is good.
Yeah.
But you have to pay a lot of attention to, or can be good. You got to pay a lot of attention to the incentives, because a lot of times more bureaucracy, the more perverse the incentives get. And the other thing he said is bureaucracy can work if you have a management team and a leader who understands that bureaucracy is a real pain and knows how to deal with it, and understands that it can eat away your business. And two, if that management has integrity. Then they can deal with the bureaucracy. Right. But he said you really got to watch that. That's the downfall of the great ecosystem of a business.
Yeah. So I think that kind of sums up points 2 and 3.
Right. We kind of combine them.
And so another point he talked about was interesting, was technology. So this is point 4. So point 4 he talked about was how technology can actually be bad for a business. And so, you have to be.
I had never, the point that you're getting to, just to cut you off, sorry, I had never actually thought of the way he looked at this.
Nor did I.
This was just.
That's gleaned through experience.
Yes, this was I don't want to say mind blowing, but this was like a real eye opener to me, because I am, what you're about to say, I am going to pay so much attention now when I look at business.
Well, and I think the reason he mentioned it is because he and Warren learned that through experience. Through having the textile company Berkshire Hathaway. So he used the example of the loom, right? So I think he had said something, someone had told Warren that there was a new loom coming that would
I think it was a worker, I want to say.
Something like that. Anyway, either way, that this new loom was going to double efficiency. And he came along and said, oh boy, I think something like, I hope not. Because,
Warren said,
because that's not going to come to us as business owners. We're just going to have to spend this money on this new machinery in order to increase capacity. But all those efficiencies and all those dollar cost savings are going to get passed on to the customer, not to us.
I think Charlie Munger's exact words were, there's going to be nothing left to stick to our ribs.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
He used that. And just for some backstory with this textile company, Buffett was already only keeping it open because he felt bad
for the workers,
closing it, because all these workers were going to lose their jobs. So
it was already a struggling business, not like it was fantastic to begin with.
Right.
So to put more capital expenditure to buy more looms, to double production and not have anything stick to their ribs, so to speak, was not a game they really wanted to play.
And with that experience, that's where they learned that. And I think Munger said there are a lot of businesses that get caught up in this technology game where they've got to buy the newest machinery or whatever, and they have to spend so much capital expenditure on it.
Yeah.
And they don't see any return, but the customer sees all the return in the lowering of the costs and deflationary pressures that this new tech brings, but nothing sticks to the business. And I said, I think he didn't use a specific company, but I think he said, you'll see a business continuing to keep up with the new technology because they have to be competitive and they have to produce, and they're spending just disgusting amounts of money on it, maybe to make 4% per annum over 20 years.
Right.
Right.
So they have to keep spending in order to stay current.
Right. So Munger's exact quote on this is that a company that needs to do this gives the owner nothing but the opportunity to spend a lot of money.
That's about right.
Right. So he said that. So in other words, look out for companies that have to do this.
Yes.
That have to spend a lot of money in order to remain competitive, but all that money they're spending is not coming back into the company. It's only flowing out to the customer.
Right. So as a side note to the technology part of things, there is also something called creative destruction, right? So creative destruction is essentially when a new technology comes along and completely displaces another company. For instance, buggy whips. So that might have been a phenomenal business until the automobile came along, and then no more.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about movie rentals. So Blockbuster being a business, and so that was a great business until Netflix came along, and now everything's online. So business killers. Technology can be can have creative destructive effects.
Which is why Berkshire is very careful about investing in technological businesses, is because they don't like, and they've said this before, to invest in companies that have to destroy themselves in order to keep competitive.
Yeah. And so Warren has said before, and this is not in this speech, but he's said before that in order for them to understand a business, they have to be able to understand or have a reasonable understanding where they think it's going to be in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So if a business looks like it's going to be changing significantly 10 years from now, they're not terribly interested.
Kind of down that same path, one thing he mentioned that, I don't know, I was always under the impression that this wasn't a very great advantage, but Munger thought that it was, is first mover advantage. Right? Because a lot of investors and business people say like, well, that's not really that great of an advantage because someone else can come in and, copy it depending on the barrier to entry and all of that. But Charlie Munger said first mover advantage with an absolutely fanatic founder and owner is a fierce advantage in business. And he kept using that word fanaticism over and over in this
He described
speech.
Sam Walton as being a fanatical.
And then he said that, and he kept saying that is something I just wanted to bank in my mind, that you need fanatic management, you need a fanatic founder, you need someone who's just like balls to the wall, crazy about their business.
Well, so point 5 that we took away from this was he compared the stock market and investing in the stock market like the pari-mutuel system. And so what's the pari-mutuel system? Well, pari-mutuel system is like the same system that's used in horse racing.
And that was interesting to us because we actually not long ago just went to the horse races. We always think about how can we use what we're learning at the horse track and how the bets are going on and the odds, and how can we take this
Compare that to investing in the stock market.
And Charlie Munger did it so wonderfully.
He did it so wonderfully. And what he said, so in the pari-mutuel system, if you've never gone to the horse track before, you'll start with certain odds. So a horse will come out with maybe 1 to 3 odds. But as people keep betting, the odds will change based on the bets that come in. And of course, there's a house take to that and all that. And there's a bunch of mathematics that gets factored in there. But at the end of it, what ended up as 1 to 2 odds may change significantly over time. And it's the same in stock picking, actually. Every day, people are placing their bets on how that stock is going to do either good or poor. And so one of the things he said is people who do well in a pari-mutuel system of betting are the ones who bet infrequently.
Yeah, bet
extremely
seldom,
infrequently. So you bet seldom, and when you find odds that are well within your favor or are very askew, you bet big.
And the reason, and just to give some backstory more on what Charlie Munger said, he actually looked into men and maybe women who were successful horse bettors. So he actually kind of it sounds like he almost studied them. Right? Because he knew a few people who actually consistently did get a very good return on horse betting. And hardly anyone does that, especially when, you talk about the house takes and everything else. And he said the one common thread that everyone that he looked into who was able to make a good amount of money in horse betting all bet seldom.
They bet seldom.
But when they found a mispricing, they also bet huge.
Yeah, they bet big.
Yeah.
So where they had an edge because of maybe a circle of competence or something like that. And that's another sub point that he made.
Oh, he brought that up a lot.
You need to have a circle of competence. So where you have an edge and you see that the odds are way stacked against this company, but you know it's better than that, then you bet big.
Bet big. Yeah, and he said Berkshire's, most of their money has come from very few. 10, is that what he said?
I think he said 10 at the time.
Okay.
10 bets.
10 bets when he gave this
This
speech.
is 1994.
And it was because they waited. There's no called strikes. And so they waited and they were patient. They bet seldom as those horse bettors did. And then when the right company came along and the odds were in their favor and there was a, perverse mispricing, they also bet huge.
They swing for the fences.
So when they have a good insight into a business, he says they swing and they swing hard. Right. And he said they make their money by buying quality businesses. When there is a mispricing.
When there's a mispricing. Now he did say you didn't have to buy necessarily the best business.
No.
Right? But you bought the business where the odds were best in your favor.
Yeah.
So
I always think of Hunger Games. Every time he said that,
the odds
may
be
the
ever
odds be ever in your favor.
So it's funny he says that because 2 companies I've been looking at recently, and I have no position in them, but are Home Depot and Lowe's, right? There seems to be a relative difference or discrepancy between the two. But
and interesting that you say that because he said you can, and I think of you when you say Home Depot and Lowe's. Munger said in this interview, you can ask somebody, you can give them 2 companies and say, what's the better company? And easy, someone will say, oh, company XYZ is light years better than company ABC. He's like, but then all of a sudden you give the investor a price. And all of a sudden knowing which one is the better company isn't as easy because it's not always about buying the best company. It's buying the best quality company with the best odds.
Right, with the best odds of succeeding or what. So I thought it was interesting where he said that you bet infrequently. I think the bottom line then is he said you're going to have a few of these opportunities come along in a lifetime. He's like, you're not going to be smart enough to find thousands of them. So you shouldn't be betting on thousands of things.
Right. And part of the reason is because you can't have a circle of competence in 1,000 things.
Right. So develop your circle of competence. And he said that developing a circle of competence in a small area can be huge.
That goes back to the ecosystem. Specialization. So one thing he talked about in economies of scale that kind of just intrigued me a little bit was when he said the informational scaling. And I thought as a small investor, that is actually one area where you can have an edge. Right? You're small and you're little, but one place you might be able to have an edge is to become specialized and just really dig deep in information, and you'll have an informational advantage and you can scale that information.
Well, 2 points to that. Sometimes being a small investor is an advantage in and of itself because you're just small. You don't have a lot of money. You're not going to move markets. You can invest in businesses that maybe have $100 million market cap,
Right.
and you don't move the needle.
Right. And that's why Warren Buffett says if I had $1 million, I'd make 50% guaranteed.
Guaranteed. I always find that fascinating.
He says guaranteed.
Guaranteed. He says guaranteed. I know I could.
I know. So we digress there, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like the point of these mental models that Munger uses is that you can use them in life and you can use them in business, and you should actually be learning how to use mental models in your decision making, because we are so prone to misjudgment.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
we are, as we digress a little bit, it's just kind of to show that Munger really uses these mental models in all areas of his life,
Yes.
particularly investing, but all areas.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and just to digress another second there, psychology is one of those things we didn't mention before that he said you need to study as a discipline.
he says most mental models are a little bit of math and a lot of psychology.
So in terms of psychology, you need to be aware of where are your weaknesses and what.
And we all have them.
And the other thing is developing, again, that circle of competence. What do you understand? So the last point, he said some of the best businesses, and I never thought of this before, but it's very obvious. The best businesses to be on are the ones where they can increase prices and you don't lose customers. No one bats an eye.
No one bats.
Maybe they do bat an eye, but they still pay it.
Yeah.
And so the example we thought of was Apple. So Apple's been ever increasing the price of their phones. I think the first iPhone was what, $500 maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe 600. And so we know.
We're always talking Canadian prices, by the way.
Yes, sorry.
If you're wondering why that's way off.
Yeah.
We're talking Canadian.
We're talking Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
And I looked at the most recent iPhone, and I think for the model we were going to look at it was like $1,800.
Oh, but it's purple, and
it's purple and it's wonderful.
And I need it.
It's the color of your shirt.
Yes. But again, it's like, that is crazy. But like, we will go out and buy it.
Eventually, we'll get a new iPhone. We will replace the iPhone because they have a moat, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those businesses are ones where, again, they just have that pricing power. Yeah. They don't need to. Disney is another one, and that's the example he used.
Like, in order to take our family to Disney, it is like, I think it's maybe $3,000 now if we want to go for multiple days with all our children, maybe more.
Yeah. Now, a caveat to that, which he didn't mention, is we may go less often.
Right.
Or we may update our phone less frequently. Right. So there is some issues with that, but at the same time, these businesses have pricing power. So the CEO and the management need do nothing more than just up the price a little bit, and they've improved their profitability.
Tesla's been, in a way, they're new to this, but they've so far been proving that they are also able to do this. Although, like I said, they don't have a lot of history there yet with this, but I think last year they raised the price of their cars like 2 or 3 times.
Well, and the full self-driving option is raised about 50%.
Yeah, it went
since we last looked.
Yeah.
The other company that we thought of actually is one of your favorites, Starbucks.
Oh yeah.
So Starbucks coffee has gone up fairly dramatically over the past little while.
Well, I took the 3 kids on their first day of school. Well, 3 of our 5 children I took on their first day of school, and I didn't get anything. They all got a drink, and it cost me $19.99.
That hurts my soul.
Yeah, I was like, it cost me $20 to buy my kids essentially a coffee Slurpee, right?
with all the sugar there.
I could have taken to 7-Eleven and spent maybe $6. But I didn't.
Just dump free sugar packets.
I went to Starbucks.
So the point being is they left happy.
Yeah.
Right?
And I paid it.
And you paid it.
And here's the other thing about Starbucks.
And you'll probably do it again at some point.
I'll do it again. And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing about Starbucks that is just like so amazing to me. And this is totally digressing, but you have a moat when you can charge, I think it's $7 for a grande now for a specialty drink.
Venti? Yeah. I think it's a
Venti. Okay, $7. And you can make them wait 10 minutes for a coffee, and no one leaves unhappy. Everyone leaves with smiles on their face.
Everyone leaves with their Starbucks cup and a smile on their face.
That is a moat. I mean, you go to McDonald's and get a coffee, and you wait longer than 2 minutes, people are freaking out.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, no doubts. Yeah.
Anyway.
So there's a significant moat there. So the point being is these businesses that can raise prices and really not lose any customers, that's a very powerful business.
A very powerful business.
So invest in we're not endorsing any of those companies at current prices.
Yeah.
But the point being is those are powerful models.
So I think that's kind of all our big points. Just on something small, he did talk about, again, the first mover advantage and finding good quality companies. And we talked about this previously when we talked about multi-baggers and Manesh Pabrai, like how to find a multi-bagger. And he had said the same thing. A really great way to invest and make a lot of return over many years is to find a good company that is quality and still kind of small and growing, right? I think that Peter Lynch would call it a stalwart company, right? They've kind of got a footprint there. You already have the history, but they still have a lot of growth and they're really good quality. And Charlie Munger's exact words were, find them small and get them while they're little. So maybe a little less than a stalwart, but I didn't know that was something that they looked for. I didn't realize that finding a quality company that was still kind of newish was a strategy that Munger used until we read through this particular speech.
So Charlie Munger wouldn't have been thinking about this when he gave the speech, but I think the model still works for that. Quite a while ago, I think it's maybe 2008, 2009, they made an investment in a company called BYD, which is a Chinese electric automobile manufacturer. And he said he loved the company and loved the management and whatnot, so they made an investment there, which they're actually recent, as of maybe a month or two ago, they've been starting to sell out after, I think, a 10x return or something like that. They made a lot of money off that investment.
And now, you said they bought that a while ago, and when Charlie Munger says buy them small and get them while they're little, of course, Berkshire can't really do that anymore.
Right,
it's
that's
harder for them. But
to do.
The fact that he said that was once a strategy that they would have used, and he was sharing that information with us, and that's a huge piece of information to take away.
Yes, absolutely.
And then just lastly, he also said, buy quality companies at a fair price and hold them for years and years.
Yeah. I think that pretty much summarizes it.
Yeah, I think that summarizes the whole speech. The whole speech, yeah.
So if you have interest, check it out. It's, again, 1994, Charlie Munger, USC speech. If you put that into any search engine, you'll find it. Yeah. Read the transcript.
It's really worth it. Yeah. That's everything. So we will see you next week. Remember to like and subscribe again because it helps us out. And
we'll see you next week.
Yeah.